Restoring men and history. And now on to Tucker Carlson's message, what he's going to be doing Twitter with Elon Musk. Tucker Carlson released this. Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. You often hear people say the news is full of lies, but most of the time that's not exactly right. Much of what you see on television or read in the New York Times is in fact true in the literal sense. It could pass one of the media's own fact checks. Lawyers would be willing to sign off on it. In fact, they may have. But that does not make it true. It's not true. At the most basic level, the news you consume is a lie of the stealthiest and most insidious kind. Facts have been withheld on purpose, with proportion and perspective. You are being manipulated. Now think about the different stories you've heard over the years and imagine in different countries the way gun control's been handled. If they have a mission, if a faction in this country has a mission and the media is a faction, think of mostly how they cover gun control, mostly how they cover the stats on homicide, mostly how they cover who cops kill, and you can look to Heather McDonald for the real stats. If you like these videos, please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification button, and we'll keep making them. Suicides, take those out. Large cities run by certain Democrats, take those out. That'll change the homicide stats. Gun control, is it a gun-free zone? Did they leave a manifesto? Will they publish some manifestos or not others? Which do you get to see? What facts and news do you get to see? If it's a trans shooter, do you get to see the manifesto? If it isn't, if it's a white supremacist, do you get to see the manifesto? Or are you told it's a white supremacist before they even know? How is it all covered? Which stories are you allowed to see? Which facts are you allowed to get? That's what he's talking about here. He goes on. How does that work? Let's see. If I tell you that a man has been unjustly arrested for armed robbery, that is not strictly speaking a lie. He may have been framed. At this point, there's been no trial, so no one can really say. But if I don't mention the fact that the same man has been arrested for the same crime 6 times before, am I really informing you? Or been deported 5 times, or whatever the case may be. If there's a bias, certain facts are left out one way, right? Going on. No, I'm not. I'm misleading you. And that's what the news media are doing in every story that matters, every day of the week, every week of the year. Going on. What's it like to work in a system like that? After more than 30 years in the middle of it, we could tell you stories. The best you can hope for in the news business at this point is the freedom, and get this, to tell the fullest truth that you can. And you'd have to be clever and nuanced to do that many times, right? The fullest truth of what? The powers that be want to be heard or told, right? Can't go beyond that. Certain words and topics are off limits. The powers that be don't want that out there, so you're not going to get that information. You've seen this on social media with your friends shut down or saying certain words to get that fact check on there, even though when you know it's an accurate fact and they augment it with something. Going on. But there are always limits. And you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be what for it? Fired for it, he says. Well, he bumped up against those limits and he parted ways with Fox. Taken off the air, what? He had difference of opinion on Ukraine. He'd released the J6 footage. The riots he covered differently. Many things. I'm sure it was a building scale, right? Of things that he pushed the limit. Always, Tucker did. And remember, both Republicans and Democrats, the Uniparty, complained about him releasing the J6 footage to you, the citizens. Why would you not have a right to see that? Why would they not want you to see it? Because it didn't fit their narrative they had created. So you go outside of the narrative, super narratives that the powers that be want, and you'll be what? Fired, he's saying. Going on. Every person who works in the English language media understands that. The rule of what you can't say, and this is important, defines everything. Did you get that? The rule of what you can't say defines everything. Imagine always having to censor yourself on what you say. Imagine if there are federal laws about that. Think about what will get you kicked offline or your friends kicked offline or shadow banned or whatever the case may be, or a fact check underneath it that you've seen for years now going on. Now, he says this about that. It's filthy, really, and it's utterly corrupting. It is corrupting. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to say what they think is true. That is so true. Think if you could not say, and it was a federal law, men are men or women are women, or the federal government was directing all press to not be able to print or say or state online or on TV or anywhere, men are men and women are women, because it didn't fit their narrative, their agenda. Or you couldn't say men can't get pregnant, or you couldn't say men can't have a period, or you can't say Ukraine is a terrible waste of money, right? Well, think if you can't say all these things. Whatever it may be, how corrupting would that be? How bad would that be for the minds of people? It destroys truth. And it's not just corrupting, it's dangerous, right? Because it's up to who, to whom, it's up to whom, the people, to also call out when something is unconstitutional. It's not just up to the branches of government, it's up to us, the people. So if we weren't allowed to call out unconstitutional acts of the federal government, imagine that if the federal government was directing that you couldn't print or talk about anything unconstitutional anymore. We have a beautiful Constitution. I love it. Think about if we couldn't talk about when an agency is unconstitutional, or the federal government is acting unconstitutionally, or the Congress writes an unconstitutional law. And it's also more corrupting than that. Think if you're not allowed to say something and forced to go along with a lie, what that does to your mind. We could go into mass psychosis on that. It takes truth to break mass psychosis in community, but let's don't go there. But think about what that would do to you as a person if you knew you had to lie. In the Gulag Archipelago, there's a great line about that, they were lying, we knew they were lying, and they knew we knew we were lying, right? So think about if you couldn't lie today in America. I mean, if you couldn't tell the truth today in America, what it would do to you. It would detach, you would become weaker, right? It would take your strength. Think of how corrupting that is to society. You become strong with the truth, he said in the last speech, weak or not, by telling lies, right? So think about that. Detached, some people would just become complacent, detached, and say, I can't affect anything. It's over. We can't even talk. Think about if you couldn't be heard and then you can't talk about it. So not only are you not hearing the things that you believe are truth now, but you can't even speak up. Imagine what that would do to your mind and soul, and how corrupting that is to a society. You would not have a voice. You would not hear anybody speaking what you believe and know is correct, true, and right. And then you couldn't even say it, couldn't even debate. And think about what not having to debate. Some people would be complacent and detached and just sit alone and be depressed. Other people might become angry and do something. But what you'd rather have is just a peaceful debate, right? We always want the peaceful solution, right? The discussion, act constitutionally and legally. But some people might do something that's not fantastic because they get upset. But we have the truth. Back to Tucker. Speech is the fundamental prerequisite for democracy. That's why it's enshrined in the first of our constitutional amendments. Well, we just talked Constitution is fantastic. Bill of Rights is fantastic. It protects you if you also peacefully protect it and stand for it. It has to be protected by you, right? Again, we have the ability and right to disagree with policies of the federal government, put them in print, talk about them. That's a constitutional right. And call out unconstitutional acts. Little history, how important they thought this was. George Mason wrote the Virginia Declaration of Rights, and he put it in there to protect Virginians from the state constitution. And that was adopted. And then when Virginia was ratifying, he said, this has to be in the Bill of Rights. We have to have a Bill of Rights with this for you. So that then protected Virginians from what? The federal government. Okay, back to Tucker. Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allows free speech. Think about that. We fought for it, and there are not many left. Think about how many of your friends, again, have been kicked off, shadow banned. Think about what's occurred. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter, where we are now. Think about that. The last one is Twitter, and going back, remember, they were directed by the federal government for political reasons not to even cover a story back for the 2020 election. Remember that? Think if they had tried to interfere with Elon releasing that. You see why the First Amendment protects you being able to disagree and release information that may impact the federal government as well, and the Constitution. It's important that we are able to call out unconstitutional acts of the federal government and not be stopped. Back to Tucker. Twitter has long served as the place where our national conversation incubates and develops. Twitter is not a partisan site. Everybody's allowed here, and we think that's a good thing. And yet, for the most part, the news that you see analyzed on Twitter, and this is a big point, comes from media organizations that are themselves thinly disguised propaganda outlets. You see it on the cable news, you talk about it on Twitter. The result may feel like a debate, but actually the gatekeepers are still in charge. We think that's a bad system. We know exactly how it works, and we're sick of it. Very good. It's the illusion of a debate, right? Because they're picking the topics, framing it, allowing certain facts. If you can't say certain words and you can't get certain articles around, you're not having the real debate. I get you see what he's saying? Going back, starting soon, we'll be bringing a new version of the show we've been doing for the last 6.5 years to Twitter. We'll bring some other things too, so that could be good. It could be improving it, which we'll tell you about. But for now, we're just grateful to be here. Free speech is the main right that you have. Without it, you have no others. See you soon. So he's grateful, and he can go deeper now. And here's the main thing. This is excellent, I think. Should be interesting and good for the country. The First Amendment's important, which is what? Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of the speech, freedom of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So that's an important one. The Bill of Rights is very important. And I'll end with this. Great George Washington said this: if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep, to the slaughter. George Washington. Who wants free speech shut down usually? Totalitarians. Who wants to curtail free speech usually? Totalitarians. So be weary and watchful of the people. Watch them. Watch who wants to curtail free speech. Restore the Constitution. Restore men. Choose freedom, not tyranny. Thank you, and have a magnificent day. If you think it's important to build better, stronger men, we'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to this channel right now.